Thank you for viewing this presentation, Strategy to Improve Land Administration System of the United States of America. It's presented by Casey Cockrell. I'm a licensed state land surveyor in the state of Texas and a graduate student at Texas A&M Corpus Christi in geospatial engineering surveying. This project was prepared for a Cadastral Information Systems Design class. Using the framework provided by the Land Administration Indicators of Success and Future Challenges report, prepared by Land Equity International in October of 2006. It was prepared in response to support the World Bank's Policy Research Report of 2003. I evaluated the land administrative system of the United States using the defined matrices from that report. The Land Equity Report identifies both qualitative and quantitative indicators to evaluate the land administrative system of a country against a mean value of 7 separate criteria in order to define an efficient and effective land administration system. I feel it necessary to provide some background to this presentation. A land administration system is an important infrastructure in developing and developed countries for real estate markets to operate in the economy. This system permeates social, legal, economic, and technical aspects to create efficient land markets and effective land use management. As you can see in this infographic presented by Professor Stig Enemark in 2009 in his paper Land Administrative Systems, it's a diagram of how an efficient land administration system works, with the 4 functions of land tenure, which is your title and registration, is connected to land value, used for property taxes and assessment of land value, land use, and land development. Toward the left, you see these combinations, how they connect can lead to an efficient land market. To the right, you can see how land use and land development can lend to an effective land use management for sustainable development. And interconnected to all of it would be some sort of IT or geospatial data infrastructure. Using the Land Equity Report, the country that you're examining and analyzing is first defined by its unique policy and legal framework, such as the type of rights formally recognized, how much of the country and population is covered by this system, characteristics of the population without formal rights, the level of disputes over the land, and the time taken to resolve land disputes. And that kind of sets up the stage to analyze some of the other indicators, the qualitative indicators and quantitative, whereas qualitative would look at the legal recognition of customary rights, the clarity of the boundaries, clarity of customary rights, and safeguards for vulnerable groups. Some of the quantitative indicators are just statistics that you can pull from census information or other GIS sources, area and population. Additional information, estimated number of land parcels, registered land parcels, annual transfers, registered transactions, transfers, mortgages, the budget for your registry, the budget for the cadastral aspect, revenue from those entities, number of the registry staff, and the total number of staff. These qualitative, quantitative indicators are then compared to a list of 7 separate criteria in order to analyze an effective and efficient land administrative system. And all this is using the report prepared by Land Equity. One of the criteria is security. The system should be secure such that a land market can operate effectively and efficiently. The next one is clarity and simplicity. This system should be clear and simple to understand for administrators and the general public. Timeliness, the system should provide up-to-date information in a timely fashion. Fairness, the system should be fair and be perceived as being so, as well as being objective. Accessibility, the system should be capable of providing efficient and effective access to all users. The system should be low cost or operated in such a way that it will not unduly burden the users. And sustainability, the mechanisms must exist to ensure that the system is maintained over time. Using the framework from the Land Equity Report, I chose to analyze the United States of America. It has a deed registry system that connects land to people at the local level. The cadastral is maintained separate from the titling system. In the United States, there's about 3,000 county or county equivalent entities, with some states even removing the county system completely. And the development of the cadastral and titling system is as diverse as the occupation and the development of the nation from 1600s to current. As you can see on the left side of your screen, there's a map of the United States with the various survey systems in effect. Toward the northeast seaboard, the original 13 colonies in Texas, there's a colonial survey system. And then out toward a major portion of the western United States, the PLSS system exists. The titling is done at the local level, at the county level. So there's 3,000 very unique title administrative offices. Using the quantitative parameters defined by the Land Equity Report there on the right, I think it's interesting to see how much information is not available. And you can speculate. Estimated number of land parcels, I've got 151 million. That came from a third-party GIS company that sells Parcel Fabric. That was one of the best numbers I could come up with. But registered land parcels and annual transfers, annual budget of registry, that information is not really available. You can guess. And I wouldn't say it's a limitation on my research. An article prepared, Who Owns America? The U.S. government tried to analyze who owns America several times in the 70s and 80s, and both times ended up failing just because of the lack of information and transparency available. And I'm not going to go into detail on the analysis from a previous report where I used the qualitative and quantitative parameters to evaluate. However, I will provide you with the analysis of those indicators. In security, the legal framework provided a secure system. However, the lack of transparency in the lending markets has destabilized the land administrative system in the United States, and that's evident from the subprime mortgage crisis that caused a recession in December of 2007. I know in some African American communities in the South, they would record their deeds with the county clerk but keep the originals for fear of fraud. So the United States has got some security issues. In clarity and simplicity, the land tenure system is very well defined by custom and statute, but it's not very simple. Most people employ the use of a professional in the legal industry to represent their interest in land tenure and the land value aspects. Timeliness, there's a disconnect between the registration of parcels and the cadastral aspect of land value, often because the liabilities are accrued by a third party, either title insurers or the mortgage lending industry. So you can actually, record deeds, but then there's also a disconnect between the title rights getting into land value. Otherwise, why you don't want to pay taxes on it. Connecting very well. And then a lot of the records are in hard copy and not available through internet or remote. The cost is unknown. There are too many unreported variables and diversity at the local level to analyze. I mean, you've got counties like Harrison County, where Houston's located, versus a county in South Dakota. One of them is massive, and the other one's got 16 people in the entire county. So, but the system's not cost prohibitive. The population is the large majority of our landowners, so it's not cost prohibitive. And then sustainability, ultimately, the system is sustainable, and it's identified as being uniquely American in spite of poor results among some of the other criteria. Some of the identified problems from analyzing the United States is the diversity of the registration areas makes it difficult to normalize comparisons and assess costs. I mean, 3,100 something county or county equivalent levels, and they vary as much as from Los Angeles to, like I said, Sioux Falls, South Dakota, or Mentone, Texas, to Tampa Bay, Florida. I mean, it's too it's too much over the map. The disconnection between the registration of titles and the cadastral aspect makes this system inefficient. It's difficult for land policy to happen at the federal and regional level because Americans tend to favor local administration over some sort of regional, state, or federal oversight and outreach for land use policies. The liabilities accrued by the free market title insurers and mortgage lending industry slow the system for transactions, and then lack of transparency there. Um, you can just watch a movie like The Big Short and see kind of what's going on in the mortgage lending industry, and it's ultimately land tenure that suffers uh, with repossessions and foreclosures. Having analyzed the United States and their land administrative system, there definitely is room for reform. Some of the solutions that I present would be to digitize all the existing land title records and create a GIS staging schema that would facilitate this land tenure function to connect data with land value, land use, and land development functions. And that might be fine in some areas. Like I said, New York or populated Dallas, Tarrant County, um, their land title registration office and their central appraisal districts for taxation and land use are very well connected. But then you'll go to other areas like Red River County, which still uses card catalog. And so even though the title registrations are available, they're accessible, they're stable, they're secure and accurate, they're not connected to the other four functions of a land administrative system. It makes it very inefficient and ineffective. And ultimately, if you could connect from the title registration, the land tenure function, to the other functions, um, you would improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the entire land administrative system. So the final outcome would be to have all the land tenure offices outputting some kind of digital data for future transactions, all previous hard copies digitized, all indexes available for query, and land titling data available, the land value, and some sort of uniform GIS staging schema. Um, Even now, we've got various, third-party companies for profit doing this in areas where there's an economic stimulus, say like the oil field industry in the Bracken Shale or in Eagleford or Haynesville Shale. It's worth their energy and effort to digitize mineral records and combine that with cadastral GIS and sell it for profit. But there are still areas, rural areas that just do not have that economic stimulus, and so their data sits in hard copy, and they're not as efficient in their taxing for sure, with large holes in their taxing maps. This is a map prepared by the New York Times that basically shows that the United States is diverse at the county level. They use different parameters to evaluate uh, personal income and health. The areas in orange, light orange, are areas that are conventionally poor and difficult to make a living in, living below the poverty level. The areas that are darker aqua, would be areas where the standard of living is a little bit higher. Specifically, you can see Los Angeles, Denver, Miami, Dallas, Austin, Houston. Um, the areas that would be orange would be, the Appalachia, Southeast, Indian reservations in South Dakota, uh, portions out west where there's just not a whole lot of population. So to come up with a comprehensive reform policy for the land administrative system of the United States has to kind of be analyzed at the local level. And some of my first suggestions in my previous report spent a lot of energy and effort analyzing at the county per county basis that I feel like maybe I was just wrong in chasing a rabbit that direction. I think that there would be counties currently existing that are highly efficient communicating GIS data from the title registry to the land value function. And I know for a fact in Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, East Texas, Georgia, Kentucky, those areas are highly inefficient, partly because they don't have digitization. They're poor at the county level. They don't have the resources available. Land Equity International report offered some developmental strategies, and there was really two that I held on to, and three that would need to be considered when implementing a reform strategy for the land administrative system in the United States. I think one would be to raise the profile of land issues in formal and political administrative structures. I think if we had, politicians touting the benefits of land administrative system reform in the United States, it would give back to their local constituents at the county level, and so I don't. That would be a real easy win for a locally elected politician, even at the state and federal level, to advocate the counties in their district. Next would be develop a framework for the private sector involvement in land administration services. This currently exists. If there's a buck to be made, there are current GIS and title providers online that are currently providing these services. I think areas that don't have an economic incentive or stimulus to do this, they're not being serviced by the private sector. So Midland, Odessa, those kinds of areas, highly profitable for private sector involvement in the land administrative sessions. Parts of rural Arkansas are not. I think also three things that we would need to consider would suggested by land equity is the existing human and technical resource of the implementing agencies at the local level. Often, the county is maintained by county clerks and their administrators. We should make decisions very early in the design stage on the registration model and the approach to Cadastral. I think we're all over the place in the United States with as diverse as we are. The next would be to prepare a financial model to reform under a range of market services, delivery technology, basic parameters that are agreed upon. One of the implementation strategies, make decisions very early in the design stage on the registration model and the approach to Cadastral. In my previous report, I spent a lot of energy and effort trying to develop some sort of GIS staging schema that would facilitate nationally from the land tenure function through the land value, through the land use and land development, some sort of GIS framework that would have to be done at the consulting level in all 3,000 county equivalents, yet permeate through the entire structure. And apparently this has already been done. Bill Clinton described it in executive order to create the National Spatial Data Infrastructure. It's currently exists, and they're making great headways because they see the value in a comprehensive GIS staging schema. So the groundwork's already been laid for 20 years, and I feel like they're escalating their ability to basically permeate our land administrative system. So that we wouldn't have to be reinventing the wheel on that. It currently exists, and I feel like we're on the downhill, slide on that. So it's not everywhere, but if the existing counties that are currently functioning well in connectivity from the land tenure to the land value are being facilitated through the National Spatial Data Infrastructure, I think that's the template that we can use to come down toward counties that aren't currently being involved, that are getting bypassed in technology. One of my suggestions would be to create a political action committee on behalf of the land administration system reform. This PAC would basically identify the counties in need of assistance, and facilitate the reform. They would be the consultants to come into these counties in rural Louisiana, Tennessee, and to communicate with that population, that county, that state, with the local lawmakers, with the federal lawmakers, to facilitate on behalf of GIS specialists and third parties, and it wouldn't necessarily be funded by general budget. I think this would cost about $10 million and function over about 8 years of the life of this project, and ultimately their purpose would be command central for the reform, and they would allow the reform to be implemented. One of the things that we would need to do is to focus on the counties that would require an extensive amount of training and resources to digitize the existing documents and provide the technology for sustainable data output. I've got this at $40 million over 5 years, and as you can see in these pictures, this is our title system. It's recorded in hard copy. It's accessible. It's not necessarily accessible over the internet. It's not accessible in a format that easily communicates with the land value cadastral. And as you can see, it's run by people. So to work on a case-by-case basis, with records that are sometimes in Spanish calligraphy or large format, the digitization of those records and into a GIS format that could be used, I think we could isolate the counties that would be the hard ones to get. Oftentimes when you're implementing a project, you try to go for the easy wins, and I think we'd be just wasting our time on that kind of stuff. We would need to spend all of our energy and effort in underserved, poor economic counties in order to try to clean up on a per state regional area level. Areas of the United States, this is that same map from the New York Times, but you can see the oranger areas of rural Appalachia, southeastern United States. You can see Indian reservations right in South Dakota, Oklahoma, low population areas. These would be the areas that we would focus on, just trying to bring up their technology standards up to speed. The desired outcome of a land administrative system reform process is to increase efficiencies in the land market and effective land use management. I think if we could do this in rural areas, underserved counties, it would improve the efficiencies in recording and retrieving land and real estate record information, lower the cost of running the land administrative system by automation, improve client access to land real estate, increase surplus revenues to allow for additional improvements to be undertaken. The final outcome would be to have all land tenure administrative offices outputting digital data for future transactions all previous hard copies digitized, all indexes available for query, and land titling data available to the land value cadastral aspect in a uniform GIS staging schema. This would be my suggestion to basically improve the efficiency of the land administrative system in the United States. And instead of analyzing all 3,000 county equivalents, and you're going to have some clear winners. Dallas County does a very good job. You're going to have some clear difficult areas where the indexes aren't digitized, or cadastral maps have huge gaping holes in them, which is surprising because the efficiency of the land value at the central appraisal level is the income for the counties. So it's to the benefit of collecting taxes to make these improvements. So I just want to thank you for viewing my presentation.